Recently I was doing some research for an upcoming video about BJ Penn, and I watched BJ Penn versus Caol Uno at UFC 41. The fight took place in 2003, and that's a time period of the UFC that's close to my heart. It's the era in which I was introduced to UFC and MMA in general, an era before the Reebok fight kits that was dominated by one clothing brand: Tapout. As I watched the fight, I noticed a Tapout logo on the mat and spotted a URL I'd never heard of before: inyaface.com. Naturally, I was intrigued by this website that was so absolutely in my face before I'd even visited it. So I checked it out. As it turns out, unsurprisingly, inyaface.com has been dead for many, many years. But still, I was intrigued. What was so in your face about this website? How hideous could a Tapout website from almost 20 years ago possibly be? I immediately dropped all work on the BJ Penn video. I had found a new calling. Just to give you a quick rundown on Tapout if you're unfamiliar, Tapout gear is some of the worst clothing designs ever forced upon cotton. Imagine a redneck who ejaculates tribal tattoos onto a NASCAR flag and you're halfway there. Even the sweatshop children that produced Tapout shirts probably felt embarrassed at the end of a 16-hour shift cranking this shit out. But Tapout was everywhere in the mid-2000s era UFC, to the point where if you wanted to show the world that you train UFC, you wore a Tapout shirt. Rocking a Tapout shirt virtually guaranteed no one would ever dare mess with you solely based on how badass your t-shirt was, even if you were an unfit piece of shit who never set foot in a gym. Tapout was formed in 1997 by Charles Lewis, nicknamed Mask, after he and co-founder Gary Fields realised there was a gap in the market for hideous MMA-related apparel. Tapout sponsored a bunch of big-name fighters like Chael Sonnen and Rashad Evans, eventually growing large enough to warrant a partnership with the UFC and become the official supplier for the Ultimate Fighter series. It's why watching classic seasons of Ultimate Fighter like TUF 10, Rashad v Rampage is like being eye-fucked by all of the worst aesthetics of the 2000s. You might recognise the name Charles Mask Lewis but not be able to place where you've heard it. That's because from 2009 onwards, you've seen the name written on the Octagon door. It's there as a posthumous celebration for Lewis, who died in an apparent drag racing accident in 2009. The UFC also inducted Lewis as an honorary member of the Hall of Fame, and that's how big an impact Tapout gear had on the UFC. Before the UFC was really mainstream, while it was still on the fringes of credibility, this ugly-ass t-shirt company made Tapout gear, and by association the UFC, acceptable in the mainstream. So now you're caught up on Tapout gear, Charles Mask Lewis, and the Tapout era. How does all this tie into my discovery of inyaface.com? Well, as I said earlier, I had to know more about this long dead website. I couldn't let it go. I needed it in my face. Then I remembered the Wayback Machine. The Wayback Machine is a website that holds millions and millions of archived pages, preserved like insects in amber for anyone to see it. I checked it out, and sure enough, there was an archived copy of inyaface.com, and it was everything I had hoped it would be. The only problem with the Wayback Machine is that it's slow, prone to outages, and anytime you want to view a web page, you have to go to Wayback Machine, enter your URL, search for it, find a working snapshot, and then load it. It's not exactly a smooth process, but I wasn't about to let such a radical website go out like this. I had the idea, what if I bought the domain and used all the data on the Wayback Machine to resurrect inyaface.com like some kind of tribal tattooed phoenix? I went to GoDaddy.com to see about buying the domain name. Sadly, Tapout still owns inyaface.com, even though since 2009 the website has been completely dead. GoDaddy offered to send a request to the owner with an offer of $100 or more to buy the domain. But honestly, I wasn't that bothered. especially not when I could buy inyourface.eu for 99 cents. After buying the domain name, I suddenly realised I had no idea how to create a website. This led to endless googling, finding a free hosting service, then saving every image and every page from Wayback Machine, trying to learn how to code HTML, which is something I haven't done since the year 2000, fixing all the broken links and images, and after 4 days and endless cups of coffee, inyourface.eu is now live. And let me tell you, this thing is a wild fucking ride. I won't spoil all the best bits before you get to see them for yourself, but I will tell you that inyourface.eu is the kind of website where just when you think you've seen it all, when you think it's scraping the bottom of the barrel, it pounds right through the bottom and starts digging. It's a roller coaster ride that begins with the Tapout mission statement, which, no joke, includes the goal to be an ever-looming presence, thus proving Tapout is to clothing what nuclear war was to the 1980s. There are other more attainable yet still hilarious goals, such as to be in your face and to rock and shock the status quo. There's some amazingly bad web design choices too, such as the idea that every time you click a link, before taking you to that link, it should launch a splash page that features some hot ladies or cringe-ass Tapout cartoon, which is an idea so bad that it gets pointed out by a commentator in the 20-fucking-year-old comment section that has also been preserved. I've tried to keep the website as faithful to its original layout as possible, but most of the splash screen images weren't archived by the Wayback Machine, so I've removed the majority of them, but any that I could get working I've left up, kinda like cringy Easter eggs. The comment section is pure gold, and I urge all of you to take a look. It's hard to believe it, but there was a time when people were genuinely, passionately engaged with Tapout gear, to the point of bragging about how their new Tapout tattoo will really help them beat up random strangers, or 12-year-old kids talking about how radical Tapout is, and how that they want to train UFC someday, to the hilarious post from Concerned Martial Artist, which reads, and I quote,
"The image you are portraying in your videos, ads and clothing is definitely not a positive one. It makes a mockery of all the values and teachings instilled in the students of combat. In addition, it makes grapplers in particular look like poorly dressed, violent homosexuals. I just thought you would like the opinion of a real student of combat art forms." And then the comment section takes a pretty dark turn when the racist pops up, but aside from that, this
The some shit page deserves to be preserved for future generations simply down to the fact that it shows us that a multi-million-dollar company once thought that having a gif of stick figures fucking on their page was the coolest thing ever. There's even some hilariously shit 260p quality MPEG videos randomly buried in the gear photographs as well. The whole thing comes from an era where websites were essentially flinging shit at a wall to see what happens. I'll leave the rest for you to discover, but this website really is a treasure. Every page manages to offend in some way, whether it's the Tapout belt buckle that is, and I quote, designed to attract hoes, or the Tapout condoms. Every pixel is an affront to common sense. This website is a time capsule to the early days of MMA, when it was all about being as real as it gets, and about being the most hardcore shit on the planet. It's a million miles away from the Reebok era with its sterile, boring, completely non-hardcore fight kits. It was a different era, but judging by the comment section, people really felt a connection with Tapout, like they had discovered something no one else knew about, like when you find a great underground band and want to tell everyone about them so you can say you knew them before they got cool. And as hideous and crass as Tapout shit is, no one is connecting with Reebok fight kits the same way. There's something about the Tapout era of the UFC that I find oddly charming. Maybe it's nostalgia talking. In fact, it's definitely nostalgia talking. But those ugly fonts, the skulls with swords in them, the sponsorships for Dude Wipes and Condom Depot, Rich Franklin's pink shorts or GSP's Hayabusa gi. It all gave the Tapout era and the fighters who were around at the time a real sense of personality that's somehow missing from modern UFC. You only had to look at GSP walking out with his headband, his gi and his black belt like some kind of French-Canadian knockoff of Ryu from Street Fighter. And even if it was your first time seeing him, his image told you, this guy is a serious martial artist. He's about respect. He's about dinosaurs. He's about to very politely murder his opponent, maybe with a fireball. Tapout themselves have rebranded completely nowadays. Gone is the iconic Tapout logo, the in-your-faceness. Even the MMA association is something Tapout has tried to shed as they've pivoted completely to wanting to be seen as a lifestyle and fitness brand to sell yoga pants to middle-aged women or something. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to preserve this website as it was in 2003, so people can see that you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain.